Hello and welcome to another video trying to get you the top grades at GCSE. Today I've researched the top 7 things that writers can do. That you can obviously do more than that, but how do I know they're the top 7 things? Well, I've gone to the master of description, Charles Dickens, because I'm trying to make this a super useful video for you. You may well be doing A Christmas Carol at GCSE as well, and that's where I've taken all my examples from. And I know that 50% of students do study A Christmas Carol at GCSE. So the 7 things we're going to learn. 1, how to start each sentence in a different way. A really powerful technique that's so easy to remember. Then I'm going to show you how to have a huge show-off sentence which says to the examiner, look at me, aren't I awesome? And the easiest way to do that is with repetition and listing. I'm going to show you how to play with the double adjective. Dickens actually goes for 3. He goes all out in his show-offness, if you can imagine such a word. I'm also going to show you how to use an extended metaphor with personification. Dickens uses that a lot. You'll see several examples of that. Then how to structure your answer around contrast. Again, Dickens a master of this. This is a technique that I find teachers don't often teach, but it's really superb. Then I'm going to show you having a reliable method for your description will help, and I'll signpost you to my video on that. And then finally, how to use the weather as pathetic fallacy, no matter what the description task. So if you're up for that, please join me with a bit of Dickens. So here is the very beginning of A Christmas Carol, and in yellow I've highlighted the words that begin each sentence. And what you can see here is Dickens deliberately varying the way he starts sentences, and when he changes that, it's for a deliberate purpose. So here the repetition is on I and I, where he wants us to get to know the narrator. You may well not have thought about the ghost who narrates this story, but this is Dickens' way of saying that's going to be really important. And the repetition of Scrooge has a rhythm to it, where he's going to expose Scrooge as a miser. But for all the rest of the sentences, he's deliberately chosen a different first word to start. And that's really the easiest way that you can introduce a variety into your writing and engage your reader. You'll see that he has like a one-word sentence here, and he's breaking the rules of grammar with a sentence that starts with and. You can really play about when you do that. Okay, now I'm going to show you one of his show-off sentences. This one is 52 words long, and it has that other major technique, the extended metaphor and personification in it. If you can learn this skill, you will be awesome. Let's have a read of the paragraph and see what I mean. The ancient tower of a church, whose gruff old bell was always peeping slyly down at Scrooge out of a Gothic window in the wall, became invisible and struck the hours and quarters in the clouds with tremulous vibrations afterwards, as if its teeth were chattering in its frozen head. So first we have the metaphor. This church tower is like an old man. So it's ancient, it's gruff and old, and it's peeping slyly down. You know, these are human characteristics. But that's just the beginning of the personification. And so as the weather gets colder, Dickens imagines the church itself shivering, and the bells are the result of that shivering. The bells are like the teeth in a head chattering with the cold. So the steeple becomes the frozen head of the church. And notice this, as if its teeth, that is a simile, using as to make a comparison. And many students think personification can only be a metaphor, but as you can see, it isn't. You can carry that personification forward with your simile, and that is how to extend it. Let's take another pause and think, well, how has he made this sentence 52 words long? And that's really worth considering. So the ancient tower of a church, can you see how the action doesn't arrive yet? Dickens puts the action later. whose gruff old bell was always peeping slyly down at Scrooge. That is an action in the past, so it's not the action that's going on in the sentence yet. Out of a Gothic window in the wall, okay, another phrase telling us what's going on, but we still haven't got the verb, became invisible. And so Dickens does this a lot. He keeps the main verb of the sentence, what's actually going on, until really, really late. And that's a powerful way to make your sentence longer. So it became invisible, and then it struck the hours. That's another verb. And then you can start listing. So it's the quarter hours and the tremulous vibrations, etc. Okay, so keeping your main verb till much later in the sentence is a really easy way to make your sentence really long. And then the other way to make it long is to add an extra bit of description into it. So the ancient church tower of a bell, that's describing the tower, whose gruff old bell was always peeping slyly down at Scrooge. That's another bit of description. Then we're going to zoom in a bit further, out of a Gothic window in the wall. Then we're going to add in something it's doing, became invisible. Then we'll add a new action and struck the hours and quarters in the clouds. And then we'll describe how it struck with tremulous vibrations afterwards. And then we'll add a further description with a simile as if its teeth were chattering in its frozen head up there. So you can see how Dickens builds his description in these layers. Okay, well, you're probably thinking, 50-word sentence, come on, Mr. Salles, give me a chance. And so here are two show-off sentences which are 30 words long and 39 words long. And we're going to see the extended personification first, and then we're going to look at the use of adjectives. So there were great round pot-bellied baskets of chestnuts shaped like the waistcoats of jolly old gentlemen. So the chestnuts are a personification, even though it's a simile, like the waistcoats of a jolly old gentleman. And then look at what they're going to be doing. Lolling at the doors, just like an old man would, not being able to support his own weight properly. And then tumbling out into the street. So again, not being able to balance properly. And why weren't they able to balance? Because they're great round and pot-bellied. This is a person who's grown too fat and too old to control his movements, this old gentleman. And that gives you this brilliant description of these big round baskets of chestnuts. Now you can see how that personification works. It carries on all the way through that whole sentence. And then finally, we've got these bags appearing apoplectic. So it's almost like having a fit because they're bursting. And this is the same with maybe the old gentleman in the comparison is drunk or even unwell. You know, he's eaten too much and he's having a bit of a fit of indigestion or whatever it is. So hopefully you can see how Dickens takes the idea at the beginning of the sentence to make it personification, and then he just runs with it 3 times. Yeah, so they've got fat bellies, they're jolly and old, they're wearing waistcoats, and then they're tumbling out into the street being apoplectic. So actually that's probably 4 or 5 things, isn't it? Let's look at the next sentence. There were ruddy, brown-faced, broad-girthed Spanish onions. So we've got the personification again by giving them a face, and they're dark-skinned like a Spanish person would be, compared to English, especially in the winter. Shining in the fatness of their growth, so the fatness also suggests a plump Spaniard. Like Spanish friars, now he uses the simile to think, well, who would be a fat Spaniard? Let's make him a friar, someone from the church, and the church is obviously rich, and so the friars are getting fat. And he's a bit disapproving of these friars, which is allowed because they're foreign, they're Spanish friars. So he's having a bit of a joke. Obviously, English friars would be much better behaved. And what are the Spanish friars doing? They're winking from their shelves in wanton slyness. So they're basically chatting people up, giving women the wink at the girls as they went by. And this works brilliantly because the vegetables are saying, hello, come and buy me, darling, very cheap, very fat, very delicious, come and get me. But the personification is that this is a very inappropriate friar making advances to women as they go by. And the women glanced demurely, so in an innocent way, at the hung-up mistletoe. So you can see that Dickens builds this personification all the way through, where the vegetables become like people, behaving in a way that would attract the passerby. And that's exactly what you need to do. You need to attract the passerby with these listed personifications that are going to make the examiner sit up and think, wow, what a great description. I haven't seen whatever it is you're describing. I haven't seen it described in that way. Okay, I've had a few comments on my channel about double adjectives, and I know this is a technique that Mr. Bruff recommends in his guide, but Dickens goes a step further. He says, why stop at 2? Great, round, pot-bellied, ruddy, brown-faced, broad-girthed. Let's have 3 adjectives, and notice how he puts them together in these compound words with the hyphen. That's a trick that Shakespeare does. And Dickens says, well, if it's good enough for Shakespeare, it's damn well good enough for me. And play around with this. Stick words together to make new ones and overload your descriptions with adjectives like this. It's really powerful, especially if you do it with personification. Okay, finally, from Dickens, we're going to look at the skill of repetition, pathetic fallacy, still combined with personification. So when we look at Scrooge, the weather throughout the novel personifies his changing state. So at the beginning, this is the beginning, he starts off being exceptionally cold, and then on the final day, which we'll look at, he becomes still cold, but in this beautiful sunshine, to show how great a change has happened to him morally. So let's have a look at Dickens' techniques. External heat and cold had little influence on Scrooge. No warmth could warm, no wintry weather chill him, no wind that blew was bitterer than he, no falling snow was more intent upon its purpose, no pelting rain less open to entreaty. Foul weather didn't know where to have him. The heaviest rain and snow and hail and sleet came down handsomely, and Scrooge never did. And so you can see the repetition of the no sound all the way through to show what a negative character Scrooge is. And if you wanted to create a positive character, you would just have the repetition of yes. And then you can see a really subtle idea. Dickens repeats the sound no. In other words, I missed one here, snow, but no and snow. He repeats the same sound to emphasize Scrooge's negativity and also to link him to the cold of snow. Okay, so that's the pathetic fallacy and the repetition, but let's look how obsessed Dickens is with personification. So the snow is like a person intent upon its purpose to make people cold. And then the rain is also not open to entreaty. In other words, you can't negotiate with it. It's not listening to you. So the rain is personified as well. And then the foul weather has knowledge. It doesn't know what to do with Scrooge because although it can make everybody else cold, it looks at Scrooge and thinks, crikey, you're colder than I am. So you can see how effective it is to have the personification again running all the way through your paragraph. Okay, let's now jump to the ending of the novel where Scrooge has now woken up on Christmas morning. He's met with the ghost of Christmas yet to come and realises that he's got a second chance at life. Running to the window, he opened it and put out his head. No fog, no mist, clear, bright, jovial, stirring, cold, cold, piping for the blood to dance to. Golden sunlight, heavenly sky, sweet fresh air, merry bells, oh glorious, glorious. So we've had quite a few contrasts in the quotations that I've shown you so far, but I haven't drawn those to your attention. I'm going to draw your attention to this one here. So now we've got the contrast of no fog, no mist, which is now positive. It contrasts to that first description of Scrooge which we saw, which was entirely negative. But here we're taking away the negative things. Now the cold, which we thought was negative, is now not, Now the cold is clear, bright, jovial and stirring. That's another contrast. It contrasts with our expectations. It's also a subtle personification. Hopefully you've spotted which one of those words personifies the cold. It's this one, jovial, happy. It's in a happy mood like a person would be. Then we have another contrast with cold and piping, which is here piping hot. Cold, piping for the blood to dance to it. So we get this contrast with blood, which is hot, which is dancing, and it contrasts to this idea of the cold being frozen and leading to a lack of movement, which we've had throughout the novel. Then that in turn is contrasted with the golden sunlight and the heavenly sky, and that contrasts with the earlier snow, the earlier fog, the earlier mist. And good writers do this all the time. They build their sentences around contrast. We have another form of subtle personification here. Heavenly sky, sweet fresh air, merry bells. Well, which one conveys a human emotion? It is the merriness of the bells. And finally, we can also see here how he builds a rhythm to the sentences through his repetition. No fog, no mist, cold, cold piping for the blood to dance to. And even more subtly, he repeats the form of his sentence. So golden sunlight, 2 words. Heavenly sky, 2 words. Merry bells, 2 words. Oh, glorious. So he really gets a rhythm through this repetition of short sentences, 2 words each, or just a few syllables, to give a real excitement and rhythm to his sentences. So hopefully you can go back over the screens, just freeze them and test yourself to see if you can spot all these things that I've been teaching you. The one that I haven't taught you is a reliable method of zooming in and out. So let's go to that in a little bit more depth. If we go back to the description of the church tower, the description before that was about Scrooge. That was zooming in. And now look how Dickens then zooms out to describe the tower. So what he does here, even though this is a bit anachronistic because there weren't films in those days, although actually Dickens did have cameras, what he's doing is changing the camera angle. He's looking at where will I take this picture from to make my brilliant descriptions. And the best way to do that is to zoom in, focus on something right in front of us, and then to zoom out and move the camera somewhere else. So I've made what I think is a brilliant video. Well, I would say that, wouldn't I? But I really do think it's a brilliant video. How to plan and write a brilliant description. And it uses this idea of 6 camera angles. And I promise you, if you use that, you will get at least a grade 7 for your writing. It's a foolproof technique. You cannot fail, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, to write a brilliant description if you use the 6 camera angles. Now, it's really interesting to me that this has had only 6,500 views, whereas one I did a year ago, which says what do the AQA examiners want in descriptive writing, has had over 100,000 views. That's a good video, and it does focus on 2 exam answers. But trust me, it doesn't have as much good advice as that one. That's the video you really need to watch. I've got another really good one on description a year ago with nearly 40,000 views. And this gives you 10 powerful techniques. But I hope you found the 7 that I've just shown you easier to get your head around. There are fewer of them. But anyway, I recommend you going to these. But this tiny video that's only had 6,500 views, it is the best, I promise you. And I'll put links to all of these up above at some point during this video. Well, don't forget, you're after grades 7, 8 and 9. My channel will do that for you. That's a promise. Even if you're on a grade 4 or 5 at the minute. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for subscribing. See you soon on my channel.